Scenes of resurrection are all around us. But what do you do when the resurrected Lord shows up to your doorstep and asks for something to eat? Well, let's talk about that for just a little bit today. I'd like to read for you from Luke chapter 24, verses 36 through 43. This is one of the many resurrection appearances. And in this particular one, Jesus shows up to the 11 disciples. So would you listen with me for these words? While they were saying these things, Jesus himself stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." They were terrified and afraid, and they thought they were seeing a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you startled? Why are doubts arising in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. It's really me. Touch me and see, for a ghost doesn't have flesh and bones like you see I have." And as he said this, he showed them his hands and feet. Because they were wondering and questioning in the midst of their happiness, he said to them, "Do you have anything to eat?" And they gave him a piece of baked fish, and taking it, he ate it in front of them. And one of the things that I love about this passage is that it shows the humanity of Christ. Even in his resurrected body, still having those human needs to be satisfied, such as hunger. I think one of the beautiful traditions and the beautiful aspects of our theology is this idea of the incarnation, that God becomes human in the person of Jesus Christ, and in bringing the divine nature and the human nature together, something profound happens that is part of our saving story. And it's noteworthy that even after the resurrection, that God does not abandon that human aspect, but maintains it and continues to long and to hunger in the ways that we do, continues to experience humanity in a way that is very similar to us. And so it makes me think, what does it mean to offer food to the risen Christ? In the same way that the disciples fed Christ, how can we feed and serve the Lord Christ in our context today? And one of the passages that comes to my mind, it actually comes from the book of Matthew in the 25th chapter, but there's this passage where Jesus is talking about feeding the hungry and visiting the sick, and visiting those who are in prison and otherwise oppressed. And he says this, he says, "I assure you that when you have done it for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have done it for me." And so what I want to suggest is that there's this beautiful connection where when we show up for our siblings in Christ, when we show up for those in our communities, our neighbors and otherwise, when we provide for the basic needs and love people in this way, we are actually serving and loving Christ. We're both serving the resurrected Lord, and in a way, like the disciples, offering food to Christ, and we're also loving our neighbor in a way that we are called to. And so my word and my encouragement for us today is to really consider who might be hungry in our communities, in our churches, in our schools, in our neighborhoods. Who are those who might not be speaking up about their need, but might not have the means at this time, perhaps, to go to the grocery store and buy the food that they need. I encourage you to reflect on that and to consider what it might mean for you to show up for someone in your community, and just to show up in solidarity and in support, and to provide for some of these basic needs. As in a time like this, more than ever, we are called not only as Christians, but as people of the human family, to show up for one another, to be there, and to be in solidarity to help one another through this confusing and chaotic time. So perhaps the invitation for you is to call your neighbor who you haven't heard from in a while and see how they're really doing. See if there is a hunger there that needs to be met. It doesn't have to feel like charity. It doesn't have to feel like you're doing anything that feels weird. But it's a meaningful act, a meaningful gesture. And I've seen this a couple times in the past few weeks. Folks offering to provide where there is a lack. And it's meaningful and it's beautiful. And I think it is a way that we can serve the risen Lord. And so what I would invite you to do is to engage down below, like this post, share it if you thought it was meaningful. And in the comments below, share about a way that you've seen in the past few weeks, folks showing up in profound ways for their friends and their neighbors. Perhaps it's by offering food or some other supplies. Perhaps it's somebody who has been making masks. But how have you seen people providing for basic human needs in a time like this? And how have you seen that as an act of serving Christ? I'll be excited to see what you share below. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.